I can see, in the past few years, since we've had some dealings with the Taxi Association, either with the previous executive or even with the current executive, there are some very fundamental issues that you all need to address, as well as taxi owners. And there are about 3 or 4 key themes that I think we need to address, and hopefully you'll address in your AGM. Firstly, Fiji is not the same like it was even 10 years ago. Fiji is becoming very modern. Your clients are becoming more aware. Whether they're becoming more aware of women's rights, and you people have had a dealing with that. Whether they're becoming more aware in terms of wanting receipts. Whether they're becoming more aware of how they are treated, because most of the people from Fiji travel overseas. They know how they get treated overseas. The demographics in Fiji have changed. By demographics, I mean the populations have shifted. There are certain areas, for example, there are not many people living there because land leases may not have been renewed. Or some people are going to towns and cities. People who used to be cane farmers are working in hotels now. People who did not live in a particular area, there's been a new subdivision and they're working there now, or they're living there now. The cane production in Lambasa is halved by 50% compared to what it was about 15 years ago, because leases weren't renewed. There are more people living now between Nandi and Lautoka and Suva and Nosori than ever before. These are all the changes that are taking place in Fiji. You now have approximately 700,000 tourists coming to Fiji. Before we used to have only about 300,000-400,000. The expectations of the public is changing. In the same way, your association needs to change. And obviously, there are still a lot of fundamental issues that exist both within your association and how your association deals with LTA, how they deal with police. I'm not saying it's all your fault. Nor am I saying that you are the only people that need to make the change. The police need to make a change too. The LTA need to make a change too. Everybody needs to make a change. But if you are the last one to make the change, you'll get left behind. And many of the issues that you're talking about, you'll still be squabbling about it for the next 5 years. So my point to you is that when you are talking about your association, when you are discussing about the way forward, you need to take all of this into account. You also need to ask all yourselves, hopefully in the AGM, what is it that you want from your association? What is the objective of the association? Is it purely a lobby body? When was the last time the Taxi Association not just gave a 3-4 page report, but actually compared themselves, how do they run bases or bays or etc. in say Australia and New Zealand? How do other countries do it? Let's see how we can adopt some of it in Fiji, maybe change it a little bit to suit us, and then present that as a report to the government, to LTA, to the police. So there's some intellectual thinking behind it. In order to adopt to modernity, we need to use our brains. We need to see how international best practice is carried out. Taxi business in Australia, for example, is big business. A taxi license is sold for about, I know about 10 years ago, $250,000. I don't know, it's probably gone up by now. 1 million. I can see all of you wanting to sell a taxi license now. But my point is, they have reached that status because they have taken a step forward. With all due respect to all of you, you seem to be squabbling about very small things. And the reason why I think you're squabbling about small things is because I don't think the key objectives are highlighted. What is the objective of this association? I know your business is different to buses, but the Fiji Bus Operators Association seems to have a more organized structure. And I urge you all, I urge all of you to please focus on the big picture. It is critical. We need to look at the long-term goals. When we reach the taxi fare arrangement, the increase, I know some of the people over here objected to it. There are various associations objected to it. They said, oh, it's too much. But if you look at the agreement, and hopefully you're all given a copy of the agreement, if you look at the agreement, it was done with a long-term view. Of course, within 6 months, everybody is singing our praises. What a great thing that taxi fares went up because the fuel prices went up. That is why it was done. We knew what was happening in the world market. So you need to also know, your association needs to know, what's the price fluctuation in oil fuel pricing? What's the price fluctuation in the next 1 year? What's going to happen in the car industry, etc.? What's the best LPG options? If you look at associations overseas, in fact, associations overseas, I stand to be corrected, but I understand you have one service station outlet. You probably should have one in each town, where you can bulk buy from the oil companies, whether it's Total, whether it's another company. But these are the things that you need to be focused on. There are people who are, for example, I accept that there is a lot of discrepancies in the manner in which the law has been applied by some of the regulatory agencies. The argument that the illegal operators are allowed to operate because there's a demand for it and the taxis don't provide a service, so they don't book them. But on the other hand, those taxi drivers who go and park in front of RB Patel should not also be booked if there is a demand for it. So it cuts both ways. So, but you see, I'm like representing you now. These are the arguments you should be making. These are the discrepancies you should be making. Our friend from my Kai from Nanonga, I mean, the issues that he raised in respect of the services not being provided, they should have been given a permit probably 15, 20 years ago. But you see, it cannot happen unless you represent yourself as one force. That is very critical. I accept the point that about illegal operators. And there is a lot of discrepancies in that. But you also need to be creative yourself. If there is a 24, I do not see, I stand to be corrected, I have not seen any taxi in Fiji that has the mobile number of theirs printed in big bold letters on the taxi. It's a common practice you go overseas. No taxi in Fiji has a mobile number printed in big bold letters on their doors. Why haven't we done it? The gentleman from Reki Reki said everybody has a mobile number. I don't have a mobile number. I go to Reki Reki sometimes. So your client, your idea of who is a client is only those people who live there. But clients are more people than that. It's not just the people who live in Reki Reki. There may be visitors. The King's Road is open now. You'll get more people coming and buying land and living in Reki Reki and more people building hotels. So you need to think 3 steps ahead. I know there's a lot of squabbling going on amongst you people. I can see it. I know it. I've heard it. Some of you I can see all revved up for the meeting this afternoon. But you should be revved up not to fight amongst yourselves, please. You should be revved up to see what will be the objectives of this association for the next 5, 10 years. What is your goal? You must also appoint or elect people who have integrity. Otherwise you won't be taken seriously. If your books aren't in order or people have still not answered questions about money missing, you should not appoint people like that. That's what the Beni Marama government is doing. You see the draft constitution, it came out in the Fiji Sun. All of you can read it on Friday, last Friday. It's going to come out again next week. I've got copies for you, you can take it home. But if you look at every single law that we put in place, is that people who hold office must be accountable. They should not have a criminal record, they should not be under investigations, etc. That's the type of people you need to appoint. It's not about who's been running a taxi for 30 years or 40 years or This guy is only a kid from yesterday. If he's a kid from yesterday, then he should appoint him if he's going to do the job. That's the main thing. So please focus on that. If that's one strong message I can give you, it's very, very important. You need to focus, then you'll be taken seriously. I received a phone call, let me tell you a story, on Friday, from this gentleman, I think his name is Fijian, from Latoka. He said he wanted to come to this meeting because he's a carrier driver. And he wanted his voice to be heard here. I said, I can't do that. It's not my meeting, I've been invited as a guest. He said, oh, they will tell you many stories that are not true. I want to give you my version of the stories. But you see, there is an opportunity. I mean, the question that I always ask myself is, if the taxi operators are saying that the 7-seater driver vehicles are taking over your business, what is there stopping a taxi operator with a taxi permit at the moment from having a 7-seater car themselves? Is there any restriction? If there is a restriction, and if you know there is a demand, why haven't you made a representation on it? Huh? Then you beat the guy who's already running a 7-seater. There's a solution to the problem. In terms of having connectivity, I know some of the bigger operators have RTs, but I urge the association, they should try and have an RT system for the nation. Or you can have your cooperatives in your districts. Everybody should be linked into the RT. Not just because you have your own companies, all the different companies should be linked in. You have one call number. Everybody calls that number and they distribute the business accordingly. It's what they call the first cab off the rank business. Whoever's next in line gets the business. I mean, these are some of the things you need to think of. Some of the creative issues. You know, I also accept the fact that there needs to be some rationalization of the laws. We found in many areas, over the years, you have different regulatory agencies, you have police, you have LTA, you may have your municipal councils, you have a rural advisory council, the rural setup. They all have their different laws pertaining to your base, to your approval for taxi permit, regulating you in terms of whether you're complying with your wheel tax, whether you're paying your insurance, etc. Now, of course, you've got the issue about drivers. I accept that, and there needs to be a rationalization of the laws. And perhaps you can make this suggestion. I had a meeting with a group of architects and engineers who were telling me that there are too many laws, you know, when you want to go and build a building. If you want to put a building in Nandi, you may need to get the approval from the health department, rural authority, then you go to the town and country planning, you may have the municipal council. So at the moment, government is looking at rationalizing those laws. You may have one authority that may deal with it. So these are some of the suggestions that you can make if you think about it, and your association needs to be focused on that. Please, it is very, very important, because I think you can play a very critical and important role in modernizing our country. We need to also modernize the taxi business. Of course, I know that there are some economic challenges by some of the taxi operators, but we are trying to do our bit. We reduced the duty on vehicles less than 2,500 cc, brought it down to 15%. There's also zero-rated duty on LPG vehicles. The idea, of course, is to ensure that you get LPG available in other places, and that's something that we should work upon and work towards. So, ladies and gentlemen, there's a number of issues that I want to, that you need to all address as an association. And you need to take a long-term view of what needs to be done. Many associations, many organizations throughout the years have actually just become irrelevant because they weren't able to change with the times. And you need to change with the times. And that is very, very important. I think, the number of other issues, I know sometimes, there's a lot of rumor mongering in the community. Somebody talks about e-ticketing. I don't necessarily think that e-ticketing is relevant to all modes of transportation. E-ticketing is something that's more relevant to high volume use, regulated bus faring, for example. So, but you need to be able to present a good case in respect of that. Not just make, you get some hero making a statement in the media, somebody makes a statement, it's disconnected. You need to have one voice. And that gives you authority, that gives you power. And I think that's very, very important. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, with those few words, I'd probably like to finish. I also had a very quick read of your constitution. It probably was drafted some time back. I'm sure you've got very good legal advisors, but I suggest that you need to look at that, perhaps not at your AGM this afternoon, but perhaps at a later stage, to have some certain standards included in it. The issue, for example, that I mentioned about those people who can stand for elections, the eligibility, the criteria for standing, that is important. The ability to perhaps representation from different districts into your main national committee. These are the sorts of things you need to look at, and look at it from a modern perspective, and I urge the executive to do so, and all of you need to have an input into that. I don't necessarily think that it's all negative. I mean, sometimes these sorts of things happen for a very good reason. So maybe 2013 is the year for the Fiji Taxi Association to re-look at themselves critically and position themselves for the future. I wish you all the very best. Thank you. Naka.